Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a place where time is measured in regimented routines, where every footstep echoes under unblinking surveillance, and where the weight of discipline hangs as heavy as the steel bars that line its corridors. This is Fuchu Prison. Established in the mid-20th century, Fuchu Prison was designed to incarcerate high-profile, violent offenders, including organized crime leaders and individuals deemed threats to public safety. Its very architecture reflects its mission. A panopticon-inspired layout ensures constant observation, symbolizing the unyielding control exerted over its inhabitants. Nestled within the densely populated metropolis of Tokyo, Fuchu Prison occupies a sprawling 32-acre compound in the city's western Fuchu district, a region historically associated with Japan's penal infrastructure. As the nation's largest and most secure correctional facility, it operates under the direct jurisdiction of the Ministry of Justice, functioning as a linchpin in Japan's criminal justice system. Established in 1935, the prison was strategically positioned to serve as a containment hub for individuals deemed irreconcilable threats to public order, including high-profile members of organized crime syndicates like the Yakuza, violent repeat offenders, and those convicted of terrorism or severe felonies. Its designation as a special management prison reflects its role in handling inmates requiring the highest level of security, with a capacity to incarcerate over 1,200 individuals under conditions of extreme scrutiny. The facility's imposing perimeter, reinforced by 20-foot concrete walls topped with razor wire, motion sensors, and round-the-clock patrols, physically embodies its uncompromising ethos. Beyond its architectural fortifications, Fuchu's operational protocols are equally rigorous. Inmates are categorized into tiers based on risk assessments, with communication between prisoners strictly prohibited to prevent collusion or gang activity. Its proximity to Tokyo's political and economic nerve center further underscores its symbolic significance, serving as a stark reminder of the state's authority in a nation that prioritizes social harmony. While its primary mandate is custodial, Fuchu's dual identity as a site of punishment and purported rehabilitation, through tightly controlled labor programs, positions it at the intersection of Japan's broader societal values, discipline, collective safety, and the paradoxical pursuit of reform within an unforgiving framework. Fuchu Prison's origins are deeply intertwined with Japan's turbulent 20th century history, reflecting the nation's evolving approach to crime, punishment, and social control. Constructed in 1935 during a period of rising militarism and authoritarian governance, the facility was conceived as part of a broader state initiative to centralize and modernize Japan's penal system. Its creation coincided with a societal crackdown on dissent, particularly targeting leftist movements, labor activists, and political opponents of the imperial regime. In its early years, Fuchu functioned not only as a detention center for common criminals, but also as a tool for quelling ideological resistance, housing individuals deemed threats to national unity during Japan's pre-war and wartime eras. Following World War II, the prison's role shifted under the Allied occupation, which sought to reform Japan's justice system to align with democratic principles. However, Fuchu retained its reputation for severity, adapting to post-war challenges such as the rise of organized crime syndicates like the Yakuza, which flourished amid economic instability. By the 1960s, the facility became a cornerstone in Japan's strategy to combat escalating gang violence, incarcerating high-ranking Yakuza bosses and members involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and armed conflict. The 1970s and 1980s saw further institutional hardening, as Fuchu introduced advanced surveillance technologies and isolation protocols to counter inmate rebellions and maintain order amid overcrowding. Throughout its history, the prison has also been a site of international scrutiny. During the 1990s, human rights organizations highlighted its use of prolonged solitary confinement and restrictive communication policies, practices rooted in its mid-century operational ethos. Yet, Fuchu's administration has consistently defended its methods as necessary to manage Japan's most volatile offenders, including those convicted of terrorism following the 1995 sarin gas attacks by the Aum Shinrikyo cult. The prison's historical trajectory mirrors Japan's balancing act between Western-inspired penal reforms and its cultural emphasis on discipline, collective responsibility, and societal harmony. Today, Fuchu stands as a living archive of Japan's penal philosophy, a facility shaped by wartime authoritarianism, post-war democratization, and modern security imperatives. Its enduring legacy lies in its ability to adapt to shifting criminal landscapes while upholding an uncompromising commitment to control, making it a critical case study in the global discourse on incarceration and human rights. Fuchu Prison's architectural blueprint is a chilling manifestation of the panopticon philosophy, a concept pioneered by 18th-century philosopher Jeremy Bentham and later refined as a tool of psychological control in modern penal systems. The facility's design revolves around a central watchtower, encircled by multiple radiating cell blocks arranged in a radial, spoken wheel pattern. This configuration ensures that guards stationed in the tower maintain an unobstructed sightline into every cell corridor, creating an omnipresent illusion of surveillance. Inmates, acutely aware of their perpetual visibility, are conditioned to self-regulate their behavior, a psychological tactic intended to internalize discipline even in the absence of direct supervision. The prison's physical structure is a fortress of reinforced concrete and steel, engineered to deter escape attempts and withstand external threats. Cell blocks are segregated into discrete units, each housing prisoners categorized by risk level, with gang leaders and high-profile offenders isolated in specialized wings. The walls, measuring over 2 feet thick, are lined with soundproofing materials to stifle communication between inmates, further atomizing the population. Narrow, dimly lit corridors amplify the sense of claustrophobia, while barred windows, angled upward to prevent outward views, deny prisoners even the solace of daylight or a connection to the outside world. Modern technological integrations have augmented Fuchu's panopticon framework. Motion-activated cameras, biometric scanners, and AI-driven monitoring systems track movements in real time, relaying data to a centralized security hub. Cell doors are automated, operated remotely to minimize guard-inmate interaction, while pressure sensors embedded in floors detect unauthorized congregation. The prison's ventilation and lighting systems are also weaponized tools of control. Temperatures are kept deliberately austere, and fluorescent lights remain illuminated 24 hours a day to disrupt natural sleep cycles, exacerbating psychological fatigue. Yet Fuchu's architecture is not solely punitive. The complex includes workshops, vocational training centers, and a medical wing, all strategically positioned on the periphery to separate productive spaces from zones of confinement. These areas are designed with one-way mirrors and partitioned workstations, ensuring labor activities remain visible to guards while preventing collaboration between inmates. Even courtyards, sparse patches of open space enclosed by towering walls, are surveilled via drones and rooftop snipers during the limited recreation periods permitted. Critics argue that Fuchu's design prioritizes dehumanization over rehabilitation, reducing individuals to mere subjects of observation. Supporters, however, contend that its uncompromising structure is necessary to neutralize threats in a facility housing society's most dangerous elements. The architecture thus embodies a paradox, a space meticulously engineered to stifle autonomy, yet framed by its administrators as a prerequisite for maintaining Japan's famed social order. In this sense, Fuchu Prison stands as a concrete metaphor for the nation's broader ethos: balance achieved through control, security enforced through invisibility, and harmony predicated on submission. Life within Fuchu Prison is a masterclass in regimentation, where every minute of an inmate's day is meticulously scripted to enforce discipline, suppress individuality, and maintain an unyielding grip on order. The day begins at 6:30 a.m. sharp, signaled by a blaring alarm that reverberates through the cell blocks, jolting inmates awake. They are given precisely 10 minutes to fold their bedding into military-perfect squares, dress in their standard-issue uniforms, and stand at attention beside their cell doors. Breakfast, a Spartan meal of rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables, is delivered through a slot in the door, consumed in solitude within the confines of their 6 by 9 foot cells. By 7:30 a.m., Inmates are escorted to their assigned workstations under the watchful eyes of guards armed with batons and body cameras. Work assignments vary depending on the inmate's risk classification and skill level, ranging from manufacturing furniture and textiles to assembling electronic components. These tasks are not merely punitive. They are framed as vocational training, intended to equip inmates with marketable skills for eventual reintegration into society. However, the environment is far from nurturing. Workstations are isolated, communication between inmates is strictly prohibited, and productivity is monitored with relentless precision. Any deviation from the prescribed routine, whether a misplaced stitch or a delayed assembly, can result in disciplinary action, including loss of privileges or solitary confinement. Lunch at noon is another solitary affair, consumed in silence within the workspace. The afternoon shift resumes immediately afterward, stretching until 4:30 p.m. with only a brief, supervised restroom break. Recreation, if permitted, is a tightly controlled affair. Inmates are led to a barren courtyard, where they walk in single file along a marked path, forbidden from speaking or making eye contact. The space, enclosed by towering walls and surveilled by guards and watchtowers, offers no respite from the oppressive atmosphere. Dinner at 5 p.m. mirrors the morning meal in its simplicity and solitude. Following this, inmates are returned to their cells for the night, where they are subjected to a head count and random cell inspections. Lights remain on until 9 p.m., though the harsh fluorescent glare ensures little comfort or rest. Personal belongings are limited to a toothbrush, a single book, and a small radio, approved only for classical music or religious programming. Any infraction, no matter how minor, is met with swift and severe consequences, reinforcing the unrelenting nature of the system. The psychological toll of this daily rigor is profound. Inmates are stripped of autonomy, denied meaningful human interaction, and subjected to an environment that prioritizes control over compassion. Critics argue that such conditions exacerbate mental health issues, fostering resentment rather than rehabilitation. Supporters, however, contend that this level of discipline is necessary to manage a population of high-risk offenders, ensuring the safety of both staff and society at large. Fuchu's daily routines thus serve as a microcosm of its broader philosophy: order achieved through rigidity, security maintained through suppression, and reform pursued through relentless control. Fuchu Prison's approach to rehabilitation is a study in contrasts, embodying Japan's dual commitment to punitive discipline and societal reintegration. While the facility is renowned for its unyielding security measures, it also operates a range of vocational and educational programs designed to equip inmates with skills for life beyond its walls. These initiatives are framed as a cornerstone of Japan's broader strategy to maintain one of the world's lowest recidivism rates, which hovers around 20%, a stark contrast to rates exceeding 60% in countries like the United States. However, the implementation of these programs within Fuchu's rigid environment raises questions about their efficacy and the true balance between punishment and rehabilitation. At the heart of Fuchu's rehabilitation efforts are its vocational training workshops, where inmates engage in tasks such as woodworking, metalworking, textile production, and electronics assembly. These activities are not merely busy work. They're structured to mirror real-world industries, with products often sold to external businesses or government agencies. For example, inmates may produce office furniture for public institutions or sew uniforms for other correctional facilities. The work is meticulously monitored, with quotas and quality standards enforced to instill a sense of responsibility and work ethic. Inmates who excel in these programs may earn certificates of proficiency, which are intended to enhance their employability upon release. In addition to vocational training, Fuchu offers limited educational opportunities, including literacy classes, high school equivalency courses, and basic computer skills training. These programs are particularly targeted at younger inmates or those who entered the prison system with limited formal education. However, participation is tightly regulated, and access to educational materials is restricted to prevent misuse. For instance, books and writing materials are carefully vetted, and internet access is entirely prohibited, even for educational purposes. Behavioral rehabilitation is another key component. though it operates within the confines of Fuchu's strict disciplinary framework. Inmates are required to attend counseling sessions focused on anger management, substance abuse, and conflict resolution. These sessions are often conducted in small groups, though interaction between participants is closely monitored to prevent the formation of alliances or the exchange of prohibited information. Religious counseling is also available, with chaplains from various faiths offering spiritual guidance to those who seek it. Despite these efforts, critics argue that Fuchu's rehabilitation programs are undermined by the facility's overarching emphasis on control and punishment. The isolation and dehumanization inherent in daily life at Fuchu can erode the psychological resilience needed for genuine personal growth. Moreover, the lack of meaningful social interaction and the constant surveillance create an environment that prioritizes compliance over self-reflection. Supporters, however, point to Japan's low recidivism rate as evidence of the system's success, arguing that the structured routines and vocational training provide inmates with a sense of purpose and a pathway to reintegration. Ultimately, Fuchu's rehabilitation programs reflect a broader tension within Japan's penal philosophy, the desire to reform offenders while maintaining an uncompromising commitment to order and security. Whether these programs truly serve as a bridge to a better future or merely as a veneer of reform within a punitive system remains a subject of ongoing debate. What is clear, however, is that Fuchu Prison's approach to rehabilitation is as complex and multifaceted as the institution itself, a blend of discipline, opportunity, and restraint that continues to shape the lives of those within its walls. Fuchu Prison's reputation as Japan's strictest correctional facility is not solely rooted in its architectural design or daily routines. It is also defined by a series of controversial practices that have drawn sharp criticism from human rights organizations, legal experts, and former inmates. These practices, while justified by the administration as necessary for maintaining order and security, have sparked intense debate about the ethical boundaries of incarceration and the treatment of individuals within the criminal justice system. One of the most contentious aspects of life at Fuchu is the use of prolonged solitary confinement. Inmates deemed disruptive or non-compliant, whether for minor infractions like speaking out of turn or more serious offenses, such as attempting to organize gang activity, are often placed in isolation cells for weeks, months, or even years. These cells, measuring approximately 6 feet by 9 feet, are sparsely furnished with only a thin mattress, a toilet, and a sink. Lighting is kept on 24 hours a day, and interaction with guards or other inmates is strictly prohibited. The psychological impact of such isolation is profound, with studies linking prolonged solitary confinement to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and even psychosis. Critics argue that this practice amounts to psychological torture, violating international human rights standards that prohibit cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Another controversial practice is the enforcement of near-total silence among inmates. Communication, whether verbal or nonverbal, is heavily restricted, with even casual gestures or eye contact requiring explicit permission from guards. This policy, intended to prevent collusion and maintain order, creates an environment of profound alienation. Inmates describe the experience as dehumanizing, stripping them of their ability to form even the most basic social bonds. The psychological toll of this enforced silence is compounded by the lack of recreational activities or opportunities for meaningful engagement, leaving many inmates in a state of emotional and mental stagnation. Fuchu's disciplinary measures also extend to its use of physical restraints. Inmates who are perceived as a threat, whether due to violent behavior or a history of escape attempts, are often subjected to shackling or binding during transfers or medical appointments. While the administration argues that these measures are necessary for safety, critics contend that they are excessively punitive and degrading. Reports of excessive force by guards, including beatings and the use of stun guns, have further fueled allegations of systemic abuse, though such incidents are rarely documented due to the facility's opaque reporting mechanisms. The prison's communication policies have also come under scrutiny. Inmates are allowed only limited contact with the outside world, with letters and phone calls subject to rigorous censorship and monitoring. Visits from family members are restricted to once a month and are conducted through glass partitions, preventing physical contact. These restrictions, while framed as security measures, are criticized for exacerbating the emotional isolation experienced by inmates and undermining their ability to maintain supportive relationships, a key factor in successful reintegration. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of Fuchu's practices is its approach to mental health. While the facility employs psychologists and offers counseling services, critics argue that these resources are inadequate given the high prevalence of mental health issues among the inmate population. The rigid, punitive environment is seen as exacerbating conditions such as PTSD, depression, and anxiety, yet treatment options remain limited. Inmates who exhibit severe psychological distress are often placed in solitary confinement rather than receiving therapeutic intervention, a practice that human rights advocates describe as both counterproductive and inhumane. Supporters of Fuchu's practices argue that such measures are necessary to manage a population of high-risk offenders, many of whom have histories of violence, gang affiliation, or escape attempts. They point to Japan's low crime rate and recidivism rate as evidence of the system's effectiveness, contending that the strict discipline enforced at Fuchu serves as a deterrent to criminal behavior. However, critics counter that the human cost of these practices is too high, undermining the principles of justice, dignity, and rehabilitation that should underpin any penal system. The controversy surrounding Fuchu Prison's practices thus reflects a broader tension between security and humanity, order and compassion. As debates about criminal justice reform continue to evolve globally, Fuchu stands as a stark reminder of the challenges inherent in balancing these competing priorities, a microcosm of the ethical dilemmas that define the modern prison system. Fuchu Prison's operational philosophy, rooted in uncompromising discipline and control, has made it a focal point for human rights concerns both within Japan and internationally. Critics argue that the facility's practices often cross the line from strict governance into systemic abuse, raising serious questions about the ethical treatment of inmates and the broader implications for Japan's criminal justice system. These concerns are not merely theoretical. They are grounded in first-hand accounts from former inmates, investigations by human rights organizations, and academic studies that highlight the psychological and physical toll of life within Fuchu's walls. One of the most pressing human rights issues at Fuchu is the use of prolonged solitary confinement. Inmates who violate prison rules, whether through acts of defiance, attempts to communicate with others, or perceived threats to security, are frequently placed in isolation cells for extended periods. These cells, often referred to as the hole, are stark and claustrophobic, with minimal natural light and no meaningful human interaction. The psychological effects of such isolation are well documented, including increased risks of depression, anxiety, hallucinations, and even suicidal ideation. Another major concern is the restriction of communication, both within the prison and with the outside world. Inmates at Fuchu are subjected to a near-total ban on verbal and nonverbal interaction, with even minor gestures or eye contact requiring explicit permission from guards. This enforced silence creates an environment of profound alienation, stripping inmates of their ability to form social bonds or seek emotional support. The psychological impact of this isolation is compounded by the limited opportunities for recreation or meaningful activity, leaving many inmates in a state of emotional and mental stagnation. Critics argue that such practices not only dehumanize individuals, but also undermine their capacity for rehabilitation, as social interaction is a critical component of personal growth and reintegration. The prison's treatment of mental health issues has also drawn significant criticism. Despite housing a population with a high prevalence of mental health conditions, ranging from PTSD and depression to schizophrenia, Fuchu's resources for psychological care are widely regarded as inadequate. Inmates who exhibit signs of severe distress are often placed in solitary confinement rather than receiving therapeutic intervention, a practice that exacerbates their conditions and isolates them further. Human rights organizations have called for increased access to mental health professionals, improved treatment protocols, and the elimination of punitive measures for inmates struggling with psychological issues. Physical abuse and excessive use of force by guards have also been reported, though such incidents are difficult to verify due to the facility's opaque reporting mechanisms and the reluctance of inmates to speak out. Allegations include beatings, the use of stun guns, and the application of physical restraints during routine transfers or medical appointments. While the administration maintains that these measures are necessary to maintain order, critics argue that they are disproportionately harsh and often applied without justification. The lack of independent oversight and accountability mechanisms further compounds these concerns, leaving inmates with little recourse to challenge mistreatment. Fuchu's communication policies with the outside world are another area of contention. Inmates are allowed only limited contact with family members, with visits restricted to once a month and conducted through glass partitions that prevent physical contact. Letters and phone calls are subject to rigorous censorship and monitoring, further isolating inmates from their support networks. These restrictions, while framed as security measures, are criticized for undermining the emotional well-being of inmates and hindering their ability to maintain relationships that are crucial for successful reintegration into society. The broader implications of these human rights concerns extend beyond Fuchu's walls, raising questions about Japan's adherence to international human rights standards. While the country is a signatory to various treaties and conventions aimed at protecting the rights of prisoners, critics argue that its domestic practices often fall short of these commitments. The lack of transparency and independent oversight in Japan's penal system further exacerbates these issues, making it difficult to assess the full extent of abuses or hold perpetrators accountable. Human rights organizations have called for sweeping reforms at Fuchu, including the elimination of prolonged solitary confinement, increased access to mental health care, improved conditions for communication, and the establishment of independent monitoring mechanisms. These reforms, they argue, are not only a matter of ethical obligation but also a practical necessity, as the current practices at Fuchu undermine the goals of rehabilitation and reintegration that are central to any effective justice system. Ultimately, the human rights concerns surrounding Fuchu Prison reflect a broader tension between security and humanity, order and compassion. As debates about criminal justice reform continue to evolve globally, Fuchu stands as a stark reminder of the challenges inherent in balancing these competing priorities, a microcosm of the ethical dilemmas that define the modern prison system. The treatment of individuals within its walls serves as a litmus test for Japan's commitment to justice, dignity, and the fundamental rights of all people, even those who have been deemed society's most dangerous. The operational success of Fuchu Prison, Japan's most stringent correctional facility, hinges not only on its architectural design and strict inmate protocols, but also on the unwavering discipline and rigorous training of its staff. Guards and administrative personnel at Fuchu are subjected to an intensive regimen that prepares them to manage a population of high-risk offenders while maintaining the facility's reputation for order and control. However, this culture of discipline among staff has also raised questions about the human cost of such rigidity, both for the employees themselves and for the inmates under their supervision. The training program for Fuchu's guards is among the most demanding in Japan's penal system. Prospective guards undergo months of rigorous instruction, including physical conditioning, tactical training, and psychological preparation. They are taught to enforce rules with precision, respond to emergencies with calm efficiency, and maintain constant vigilance over inmates. A significant portion of their training focuses on the use of force, including hand-to-hand combat, restraint techniques, and the operation of non-lethal weapons such as stun guns and batons. This emphasis on physical control reflects the facility's priority of maintaining security at all costs, even in the face of potential violence or rebellion. Psychological training is another critical component of the program. Guards are educated on the behavioral patterns of high-risk offenders, including gang members and individuals with severe mental health issues. They are trained to recognize signs of agitation, manipulation, or potential escape attempts, and to respond with measured but decisive action. However, this training often emphasizes suspicion and control over empathy, fostering an environment where inmates are viewed primarily as threats rather than individuals in need of rehabilitation. Critics argue that this mindset contributes to the dehumanizing treatment of inmates and perpetuates a cycle of mistrust and hostility. The daily responsibilities of Fuchu's guards are shaped by the facility's panopticon-inspired design, which requires constant surveillance and intervention. Guards are stationed in central watchtowers and patrol the cell blocks on rotating shifts, ensuring that every movement is monitored and every infraction is swiftly addressed. Communication with inmates is kept to a minimum, with guards instructed to maintain a professional distance and avoid any form of personal interaction. This approach, while effective in maintaining order, creates an environment of mutual alienation where both guards and inmates are stripped of their humanity in the pursuit of control. The psychological toll on Fuchu staff is a seldom discussed aspect of the facility's operations. The relentless pressure to enforce rules, the constant threat of violence, and the emotional strain of working in a highly punitive environment contribute to high levels of stress and burnout among guards. Studies have shown that correctional officers in maximum security prisons are at increased risk for mental health issues such as PTSD, depression, and anxiety. At Fuchu, where the stakes are particularly high, these risks are exacerbated by the facility's culture of discipline and the lack of support systems for staff. Despite these challenges, Fuchu's guards are expected to adhere to a strict code of conduct, with any deviation from protocol met with severe consequences. Reports of misconduct, whether excessive use of force or failure to enforce rules, are investigated internally, and offending staff may face disciplinary action, suspension, or termination. However, the lack of independent oversight and transparency in these investigations has led to allegations of bias and cover-ups, further complicating the relationship between staff and inmates. The culture of discipline among Fuchu staff also extends to its administrative personnel, who are responsible for overseeing the facility's operations and ensuring compliance with national and international standards. These individuals are tasked with balancing the competing priorities of security, rehabilitation, and human rights, often under intense scrutiny from both the government and advocacy groups. The pressure to maintain Fuchu's reputation as a model of order and control can lead to a focus on punitive measures at the expense of more compassionate approaches, further entrenching the facility's controversial practices. Critics argue that the emphasis on staff discipline at Fuchu creates a culture of rigidity and repression, where the humanity of both inmates and guards is sacrificed in the pursuit of security. They call for reforms that prioritize empathy, mental health support, and professional development for staff, arguing that a more balanced approach would not only improve conditions for inmates, but also enhance the well-being and effectiveness of guards. Supporters, however, contend that the strict discipline enforced at Fuchu is necessary to manage a population of high-risk offenders, ensuring the safety of both staff and society at large. Ultimately, the role of staff discipline at Fuchu Prison reflects the broader tensions within Japan's penal system, the need for order versus the imperative of compassion, the demands of security versus the goals of rehabilitation. As debates about criminal justice reform continue to evolve, the experiences of Fuchu's guards and administrators serve as a reminder of the human cost of maintaining one of the world's strictest prisons, a cost borne not only by inmates, but also by those tasked with their supervision. Fuchu Prison's role in Japan's criminal justice system cannot be fully understood without examining the broader context of recidivism in the country. Japan boasts one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world, with approximately 20% of released offenders reoffending within 5 years, a figure that stands in stark contrast to rates exceeding 60% in countries like the United States. This remarkable statistic is often cited as evidence of the effectiveness of Japan's penal system, including facilities like Fuchu. However, the relationship between Fuchu's strict disciplinary measures and Japan's low recidivism rate is complex and multifaceted, raising important questions about the balance between punishment, rehabilitation, and societal reintegration. At the heart of Japan's success in reducing recidivism is its emphasis on rehabilitation and reintegration, principles that are ostensibly embedded in the design of its correctional facilities. Fuchu, for example, operates vocational training programs that teach inmates skills such as woodworking, textiles, and electronics assembly. These programs are intended to provide inmates with marketable skills and a sense of purpose, reducing the likelihood of reoffending upon release. Additionally, Fuchu offers educational courses, counseling sessions, and behavioral therapy aimed at addressing the root causes of criminal behavior such as substance abuse, anger management issues, and lack of education. However, critics argue that the effectiveness of these programs is undermined by the facility's overarching emphasis on punishment and control. The rigid daily routines, enforced silence, and pervasive surveillance at Fuchu create an environment that prioritizes compliance over personal growth. Inmates are stripped of autonomy and subjected to conditions that can exacerbate mental health issues, such as depression and anxiety, which are known risk factors for recidivism. The use of prolonged solitary confinement and harsh disciplinary measures further compounds these challenges, leaving many inmates ill-prepared for the social and emotional demands of life outside prison. Another factor contributing to Japan's low recidivism rate is the country's strong social support systems and cultural emphasis on reintegration. Upon release, former inmates often benefit from family networks, community programs, and employer initiatives designed to facilitate their transition back into society. Japan's cultural values, which prioritize harmony, collective responsibility, and second chances, play a significant role in reducing stigma and encouraging rehabilitation. However, these societal advantages are not equally accessible to all inmates, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds or those who lack strong family ties. Fuchu's role in this broader context is both pivotal and paradoxical. On one hand, the facility's vocational and educational programs align with Japan's rehabilitative goals, providing inmates with tools to rebuild their lives. On the other hand, its punitive practices and dehumanizing conditions may hinder the very outcomes they are meant to achieve. The psychological toll of life at Fuchu, combined with the stigma of incarceration, can create significant barriers to successful reintegration, particularly for inmates who have spent years in isolation or under constant surveillance. The debate over Fuchu's impact on recidivism is further complicated by the lack of comprehensive data on post-release outcomes for its inmates. While Japan's overall recidivism rate is low, there is limited information on how former Fuchu inmates fare compared to those from less restrictive facilities. Some studies suggest that inmates from maximum security prisons like Fuchu face greater challenges in reintegrating due to the psychological and social effects of prolonged isolation and strict discipline. Others argue that the structured environment and vocational training provided at Fuchu equip inmates with the discipline and skills needed to succeed in society. Ultimately, the relationship between Fuchu Prison and Japan's low recidivism rate is a reflection of the broader tensions within the country's criminal justice system. While Japan's emphasis on rehabilitation and societal support has undoubtedly contributed to its success in reducing reoffending, the punitive practices employed at facilities like Fuchu raise important questions about the human cost of this achievement. As debates about criminal justice reform continue to evolve, Fuchu serves as a critical case study in the complex interplay between punishment, rehabilitation, and reintegration, a microcosm of the challenges and contradictions that define the modern penal system. Fuchu Prison stands at the center of a profound ethical debate that transcends its walls, touching on fundamental questions about justice, humanity, and the purpose of incarceration. As Japan's strictest correctional facility, Fuchu embodies a system that prioritizes order, security, and discipline above all else. While its proponents argue that these measures are necessary to protect society and rehabilitate offenders, critics contend that the facility's practices often cross the line into dehumanization and abuse, raising serious ethical concerns about the treatment of individuals within its walls. At the heart of this debate is the tension between punishment and rehabilitation. Fuchu's proponents argue that its strict disciplinary measures are essential for managing a population of high-risk offenders, including violent criminals and organized crime members. They point to Japan's low crime rate and recidivism rate as evidence of the system's effectiveness, framing Fuchu as a necessary bulwark against chaos and disorder. From this perspective, the facility's emphasis on control and surveillance is not merely punitive but also protective, safeguarding both inmates and society at large. However, critics argue that Fuchu's practices often prioritize punishment over rehabilitation, undermining the very goals they are meant to achieve. The use of prolonged solitary confinement, enforced silence, and harsh disciplinary measures creates an environment that is more conducive to psychological harm than personal growth. Inmates are stripped of autonomy, denied meaningful human interaction, and subjected to conditions that can exacerbate mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and PTSD. These practices, critics argue, violate international human rights standards and raise serious ethical questions about the treatment of individuals within the criminal justice system. The ethical debate surrounding Fuchu also extends to its impact on staff and society. Guards and administrative personnel are subjected to intense pressure to enforce rules and maintain order, often at the expense of their own mental health and well-being. The culture of discipline and control that permeates the facility can create an environment of mutual alienation, where both inmates and staff are dehumanized in the pursuit of security. This raises important questions about the broader societal implications of such a system, including the moral cost of prioritizing order over compassion and the long-term effects of perpetuating cycles of punishment and repression. Another dimension of the ethical debate is the question of accountability and transparency. Fuchu's opaque reporting mechanisms and lack of independent oversight make it difficult to assess the full extent of abuses or hold perpetrators accountable. Allegations of excessive force, physical abuse, and systemic neglect are often met with denial or deflection, further eroding trust in the system. Critics argue that greater transparency and accountability are essential for ensuring that the rights and dignity of inmates are respected, while supporters contend that such measures could undermine the facility's ability to maintain order and security. The ethical implications of Fuchu's practices also extend to its role in Japan's broader criminal justice system. As a symbol of the country's commitment to order and discipline, Fuchu reflects the values and priorities that underpin Japan's approach to crime and punishment. However, it also highlights the contradictions and challenges inherent in this approach, particularly in balancing the demands of security with the imperatives of justice and humanity. The facility's emphasis on control and punishment raises important questions about the purpose of incarceration. Is it to rehabilitate and reintegrate, or simply to contain and punish? Ultimately, the ethical debate surrounding Fuchu Prison is a microcosm of the broader dilemmas that define the modern penal system. It forces us to confront difficult questions about the nature of justice, the limits of punishment, and the responsibilities of society toward those who have been deemed its most dangerous members. As debates about criminal justice reform continue to evolve, Fuchu serves as a stark reminder of the challenges and contradictions inherent in balancing security, humanity, and the pursuit of a just society. The treatment of individuals within its walls is not merely a reflection of Japan's penal philosophy, but also a litmus test for our collective commitment to the principles of dignity, fairness, and compassion. Fuchu Prison, with its towering walls and unyielding discipline, stands as a powerful symbol of Japan's commitment to order and security. Yet, it also serves as a mirror, reflecting the ethical dilemmas and societal tensions that define the modern penal system. As we grapple with the complexities of justice, punishment, and rehabilitation, Fuchu challenges us to ask, can a system be both just and humane? Can it protect society without forsaking the dignity of those it confines? The answers to these questions are not simple, but they are essential. Fuchu's story is not just about the individuals within its walls. It is about the values we uphold as a society and the kind of future we wish to build. As we move forward, let us strive for a justice system that balances security with compassion, discipline with empathy, and punishment with the possibility of redemption. Only then can we truly honor the principles of fairness, dignity, and humanity that lie at the heart of any just society. Thank you.